always ethically sourced diamonds, rubies, and sapphires, you'll have tons of options to create a ring that's so her. Our non-commissioned jewelry consultants will help you get an awesome ring that fits your budget, whether you come into the store or go online. You can even book an in-store or virtual appointment. We'll make sure her engagement ring is perfect. And the proposal? Well, that's where you get to shine.
Welcome to the show. My name is Charlton with Big C. This is Charlton and Big C Sports, coming to you worldwide on the Big C Sports Network, on the #1 network in the United States of America. And Big C Sports has been voted the #1 sports show in the universe, according to Big C. And them good old boys down south, I want to say bienvenidos to all of our listeners in Latin America, also across the pond in London, England, as well as Paris, France. Of course, you good old boys in Canada and Africa, the Big C tribe. But there's no one we love more than the good old boys down south. In the land of the free and the home of the brave on a beautiful April the 5th, 2021. Fondo Deportes. Bonjour, Big C. How's it going for you good old boys down south?
Well, Charlton, we're all down here trying to recover from an exciting weekend of basketball on the men's and women's side in college and also in the NBA. But once again, I want to thank our frontline healthcare workers, our nurses, doctors, first responders. They are always there to help us recover.
Always there to help us recover, and we love recovering. I want to say today's show is sponsored by your Northern California Cadillac dealers, home of the all-new Cadillac Escalade, the standard of the world. When you go by and test drive yours, tell them Charlton and Big C sent you, as well as a fleet of Cadillac cars. And also, all around the world, just say Google or Alexa, play Big C Sports Podcast. You will hear from our sponsors. You will hear welcome to the show. I will introduce Big C as a mystic, and he will do his thing from 3,000 miles away. And I really do appreciate the way things are growing with Big C Sports. You can follow Big C Sports on Spotify. You can follow Big C Sports on Xfinity, Comcast TV, Apple TV, Roku TV, Amazon Fire TV, and a lot of smart TVs all over the universe. If you better have a smart TV, I'll be sitting there looking at us to a picture. Man, I love pausing. We're pausing for someone to get that ring on Championship Monday. It will be Gonzaga or Baylor. It's all fair in love and war, but we'll never pause on our Veterans Crisis Hotline. They really are experienced helping veterans and their loved ones get help every day. Big C, why should everybody care?
Well, Charlton, it would be nice if our country could pay as much attention to our great veterans as we do to our sporting events. We lose over 24 veterans a day. We only crown one national champion at a time, Charlton.
Yep.
And we need, as a country, to feel more for our veterans who've given us the opportunity to enjoy all the great sporting events that occur in America. Suicide has been a terrible pandemic in this country, Charlton, for a long time. A lot of people are preoccupied thinking about COVID-19 and how do you get things back to normal.
Yep.
It would be great to be able to get those veterans' lives back to normal where they did not suffer from PTSD, financial and physical ailments, Charlton. So as we look at our country about celebrating, thinking about all the great sporting events,
Yep.
don't forget about those people who made it possible for us to be able to enjoy those great sporting events in freedom.
Very well said. I love doing our part. 800-273-8255. That's 800-273-8255. Or you can text 838-255. That's 838-255. If you're online, simply go to veteranscrisisline.net. That's veteranscrisisline.net. You can definitely get some help for our veterans and their loved ones. It's all fair in love and war. Very happy to be affiliated with Valley, home with weekly TV on Dish TV, Direct TV, AT&T Uverse, TV 53, home of the San Francisco Giants, and the Say Hey Kid, as well as the home run king Barry Bonds. When you reach out to them, just tell them Big C sent you. Our goal is simple: recruit 10,000 real estate agents and brokers all over this great country to help put people back to work. Just like McDonald's does it, car dealerships are doing it, sports teams are doing it too. Watch TV and real estate work for you. 800-772-8624. If you're looking for opportunities in real estate, go to bigcsports.pacwm.com. Most of our loans are underwritten by Rocket Mortgage, the #1 lender in the country on the wholesale side. Also, thank you Xfinity, Comcast TV, and Comcast Spotlight for presenting Big C Sports to the universe. Just like God said, let there be light. Open your cell phones and say, play Big C Sports Podcast. You will see all of our apps pop up from all over the world. And I really do appreciate the growth we're having with Big C Sports. Man, Big C, we've crowned already a ladies national championship. So congratulations to the Stanford Cardinals being the #1 college basketball team in the universe. Also, I want to say congratulations to the University of Arizona for getting there and trying to have that one shining moment. Big C, I know we talk so much about men's and women's sports. We have Gonzaga and Baylor. They're going to crown the champion tonight. But give me your feelings and your thoughts on what happened with Stanford University and also University of Arizona, a 54-53 championship win, the first time for Stanford since 1992. Big C, your thoughts?
Well, this was the third meeting of both of these Pac-12 teams, Charlton, this season, and Stanford had won the two prior meetings going into the championship game on Saturday night. But, it was a wrenching affair. Stanford was the more dominant of the two teams on the court. They got out to a commanding lead. But the heart that Arizona came back with, Charlton, late in the contest is what you expect from athletes, Charlton, that never give up moment. And even late in the game, Arizona had an opportunity to potentially win the game. They missed the tip-in shot at the end. But, you have to praise these young ladies, Charlton, for the efforts that they give on the court. They don't have the high-flying athletes that we see on the men's side with the spectacular dunks and all that. They're fundamentally sound when it comes to basketball.
Yeah.
But what I appreciated the most from this game, Charlton, is the emotion that was spent after the game. You could see the sincerity in the young ladies from Arizona after they came up short in this contest with their emotional feelings left on their sleeves.
Yeah, it was gripping, Big C. Stanford got through by the skin of their fingernails in both getting past the South Carolina Gamecocks and then the Arizona program, the Arizona Wildcats, Big C. There's something about Stanford. It's amazing. It was worth the wait when you think about it. 29 years after winning its last NCAA title, Stanford is a national champion once again down on the farm in Palo Alto, Big C. When you think about the Cardinals, they held them off 54-53. It was a wild game in Arizona. But more impressive, I think they were away from home 80 plus days away from their own campus because of the COVID situation in Northern California. But the #1 overall seed in 2021 NCAA women's basketball tournament, Stanford coach Tyra Vanderveer won her third championship, adding to the program's titles 1990 and 1992. Big C, the 29-year gap is the longest for any Division I coach in any sport. Big C, your thoughts?
Well, this is an exercise in futility, Charlton, when you look at it. They've had so many expansive women's programs across the country, and we think about the diversity and equality on the level of women's college basketball, Charlton, and we just don't see that dominant team. You think about UConn losing its fourth straight run in the Final Four, Charlton, in championship round, 4 consecutive years. They have not been able to get over the hump because there's been a new champion every year, and now that Stanford is on top of the heap, they got to spend the next year defending that.
They got to spend that. And I want to ask your thoughts, too, because I know we started this whole tournament talking about gender equity, Big C. NCAA President Mark Emmert says, well, let's talk about all this stuff after the tournament. Well, the tournament's over for the women, and then you have the Supreme Court justices, and they were saying that it's an antitrust violation what the NCAA has been doing. Now, I know people can say, well, the women don't get the same type of ratings that the men get. At the same time, Big C, they're not as advertised as much as the men. No one can tell me that these last 4 games that we've seen hasn't been top of the line, Big C. Your thoughts?
Well, they've been heart-wrenching games, very competitive, Charlton. But, what you're looking at with the Supreme Court, and they're talking about student-athletes being able to make money off their name and likeness, that is not going to be as beneficial as a lot of people will tend to believe that athletes can make money through promotional and off their names and likeness.
Yeah.
Because the biggest thing that we see are these games that people play on the internet or have some type of component at home to play them on their television where they pick certain players and match them up on teams, whether it's college or professional. Players out of those games, Charlton, might make anywhere from $1,000 to $5,000 a year off their likeness.
Yeah.
But you think about those college coaches, Charlton, they're still going to go out there and get those $5 to $10 million contracts.
Yeah.
It's not going to affect them, or it's going to affect the university.
Yep.
I think it needs to be restructured in how they look at that as far as having the males and females being competitive financially after this season is over, if Mark Emmert is going to be sincere about this measure.
Yeah, if he's going to be sincere, it's all fair and love and war. I'm glad the Supreme Court is also putting their hand in the cookie jar. And no one's saying that everything has to be perfect from the first time You can always improve on things, just like car companies, just like healthcare. They improve on things, and it takes time. But if you don't put it on the table to talk about it, then no one benefits from it. Give me one more thought, Big C. We talk about the lack of African-American women coaches and African-American male coaches. We had African-Americans in the final, the championship rounds with Arizona and also South Carolina. Obviously, didn't get a chance to cut down the nets, but only one team's going to cut down the nets. Give me your feeling on where this is going to lead to, maybe over the next 5 years, for women just getting a chance to even get the interview, Big C, of color. Big C, your thoughts?
Charleston, I don't see a sea change in the way that universities and athletic departments think about African-American men or women coaches, Charleston, because the biggest problem comes from the people who make the decisions. These coaches do not look like them when they come in for a hiring candidacy, Charleston. So what we've seen over the last 10 years in college athletics, we're going to continue to see over the next 10 years in college athletics. We're going to see a lack of black coaches on the college level, men and women-wise, Charleston, because as long as the people that are hiring them don't look like them, they're not going to be a run on hiring minority coaches.
Well, all we ask is that they get a chance, and hopefully with seeing this exhibition, they'll start to get a chance. But congratulations, Stafford University, with a win over their conference rival, University of Arizona Wildcats. It's all fair in love and war. Big C, I want to take a look at the men's bracket. We know we have Gonzaga versus Baylor tonight, but I want to go back to over the weekend, and you had these great games. I'm telling you, there's something about basketball that I've loved. And then I look at the Battle of Texas, Big C. You would think Battle of Texas, you're thinking about University of Texas, maybe Texas A&M or Texas Tech, but no. The Battle of Texas, number 1 Baylor, they blast the Houston Cougars by the score of 78-59. They advance to their first title game in over 70-plus years, Big C. Your thoughts?
Well, Charleston, this was a game of physicality, and that's where Baylor shines when it gets to physical basketball. You talk about the great athletes that they have on the team. Houston is a team that wanted to push the ball up and down the court.
Yeah.
But when you think about this scuffling defense that Baylor runs, Charleston, they just basically suffocated the Houston offense. And they were crashing the boards. And when it came to being physical, they had the athletes' size and speed to outman Houston.
Yeah, they did, Big C. Number 1 Baylor, simply too much for Kevin Samplin's team, Big C. The number 2 seed Houston team. Really proud of how Houston got there. They're not the biggest program in Texas. They're kind of an afterthought program in Texas, a lot like Gonzaga is out of the West Coast, Big C. Kevin Sampson did his thing, but they did fall by the score of 78-59 in the Final Four matchup. Jarrett Butler, the star for the Baylor Bears, Big C, produced 5 double-digit scores, 17 points, 6 of 9 shooting, 4 or 5 from three-point range, 4 rebounds, and 2 assists and 2 steals. Davion Mitchell also was a star player, also excellent, earning a double-double with 12 points and 11 assists. Big C, there's just so much we could talk about with that Baylor Bear team, and I know they're playing tonight, but Baylor, obviously, not considered the marquee program in the state of Texas. That's always the University of Texas. But Baylor's definitely now, I would say, the best program coming out of the state of Texas. Big C, your thoughts?
Well, ironically, Houston has always been the marquee program in the state of Texas. They've been to the Final Four 3 times.
Yeah.
And no other school in that state has been to the Final Four that many times. It's been, over 50, 60 years since Baylor. I think 1948 was the last time that Baylor's gone this far in the tournament. So they woke up some echoes of the past, dusted off some cobwebs.
Yep.
But this team, from start to finish this season, has been there. These teams were supposed to have met up earlier in the season, Baylor and Gonzaga, but due to COVID-19 protocols, that game was canceled. But both of these teams have delivered as advertised in the preseason. The best 2 teams in the country, and now they're meeting each other tonight for the championship.
Yeah, it's amazing. So congratulations to Baylor, the Baylor Bears, getting their way to claw their way into Indianapolis to have a chance to play for the national title against the best basketball program that people have said from start to finish has been the University of Gonzaga. And Gonzaga, my goodness, people say this is a better game than when we saw Duke beat Kentucky with Christensen and Leitner's turnaround, Big C. NCAA college basketball universe, number 1 Gonzaga versus number 11 UCLA Bruins. It follows the script, Big C. They beat the UCLA Bruins at the buzzer in overtime. It was a 93-90 overtime thriller, a 30-foot off the glass Big C, a bank shot that went in for 3. It's like they had a magnet on the rim, Big C. Your thoughts?
Well, the problem was, Charlton, he didn't call bank, so I don't know if the shot should have counted. I mean, in the game awards, you got to call that.
Yeah.
But it was a great shot by Suggs, to end the game. I mean, it was an epic, combatants going back and forth all night long. I mean, this was one of the highest shooting games in tournament history, Charlton, in the Final Four.
Yeah.
That you had two teams shoot well in excess of 50% from the floor. You just don't get that at this time of the year. So you have to take your hat off to both of those teams, Charlton. Those young men played their heart out.
Yeah.
And neither one of them came to lose.
No, and the one thing when I think about some of the great players, I think John Stockton's the only great, well-known household name player from Gonzaga. And again, UCLA, you got Lou Alcindor, Kareem Abdul-Jabbar, the great Bill Walton, Reggie Miller, Russell Westbrook, Zach LaVine, Lonzo Ball. We talked about so many great players that have played at UCLA Paul Pavilion. But this game was really a game of the ages. Big C, no number 1 seed has been as pushed, I don't think is this hard, trying to get to the Final Four where they had to do it in overtime and to do it with 3.3 seconds, getting the ball out of bounds to race up to the half court and launch a 30-foot basket that goes off the glass and into the basket. And as you said, they didn't call a bank. Have we ever seen a team advance that difficultly? Big C, your thoughts?
Oh, Charlton, there's been several teams of the past that were ranked number 1 going into the tournament and that was pushed into the depths of a contest before they were able to pull out the victory. So, I mean, what we've seen on Saturday night, Friday night, we've seen that before.
Yeah.
But this was epic, in this time and stage of COVID that, we have not seen it in some time. Gonzaga was pushed to the limit. It's just going to be a matter of how much they have left in the tank tonight to go against that physical Baylor team, Charlton, that runs at a fast pace just like Gonzaga did. One of the most disappointing things about the game is that UCLA was slowing the game down. They didn't want to go out and run as athletes. They knew the only way that they could make the game competitive is that they take Gonzaga out of what they do best. Gonzaga still was shooting over 60% from the floor, Charlton. In the late stages of the game, UCLA was shooting in the high 50s. But, when you think about that, UCLA slowed the ball down to allow themselves a chance to stay in the game.
Yeah, it's about knowing your strategy. Some people like to drive a sports car. Others drive a nice SUV. It's a different way of getting it, but they both get there. Number 1 seed Gonzaga had won 29 of his 30 games by double digits entering the showcase against the mighty UCLA Bruins. The 11 seed with 11 national championships. Gonzaga's chasing their first national championship tonight. And what I really like about the game, and anyone could complain, UCLA, they had to fight their way into the tournament, Big C. That 4-team play-in, they had lost 4 in a row coming out of the Pac-12. They ended up knocking off the great Michigan State program, Big C. They knocked off Alabama. They knocked off Michigan. I mean, they beat everybody that they were told they were going to lose to, and then they lose in overtime to the number 1 seed Gonzaga. There's one shining moment where people say, what about that play, or what about that play? And every team has that statement, Big C. But with I want to say it was about a minute to play in the game, Avery was going to the basket, and he was going to dunk it, but he got hit on the back of the hand by Suggs. Even the announcer said, well, he was hit on the back of the hand, but they didn't call a foul. Avery goes to the ground. Suggs gets the ball, and his basketball acumen, he rushes down the court, knowing the officials were not going to blow the whistle, and he gives a bounce pass down the court, and then his teammate slam dunks it. That was a 4-point play, and it may have made all the difference in the game, Big C. Your thoughts?
Well, there were several moments that made key differences in the game. I think that he got the ball from behind, just like a lot of officials said, because the player Avery put his hands on the rim, both hands. It's just a matter he did not elevate enough. You think a guy that's 6'9" should elevate more than that, but he did not have the ability to do it late in the game. Maybe been a little game for Jake Charlton. But this is the heart of Gonzaga, when you never give up. And you think about Suggs being the competitive athlete that he's always been, being a football star quarterback as well as a star basketball player. Could have played anywhere in the country, in either sport, Charlton.
Yeah.
But, it showed his athleticism in not giving up on the play.
Yeah, it showed a lot. There's so much. I just love seeing how the NBA, sometimes you wonder if people are watching games. I went out and played golf on the weekend, Big C. But you think about all these NBA players that were tweeting in about that game and how they were just glued to their TV sets. And some people don't believe in college basketball because we don't know the names, because it's one and done. Unlike back in the days when Kareem played and Lou Alcindor and the great Bill Walton, Reggie Miller, those guys played, we knew their names because we saw them play for more than one season. A lot of times people have missed that, and I hope we get that back coming in for the next of college football, college basketball, but I doubt if that's going to happen. But congratulations, Gonzaga. I think they've won 12 straight versus Pac-12 competition. So even myself saying that if Gonzaga had played in the Pac-12, there's no way they would be undefeated the way they've run through the West Coast Conference. But I think on the court, they decided to win it on the court, and that's all you can ask. Big C, congratulations to Stanford. Congratulations to the great program of Baylor. Congratulations to Gonzaga. Now we have tonight, and this is what everyone's been waiting for. I think the Gonzaga game against UCLA, that was their closest contest, obviously, of the year, and their closest contest in many, many moons. I think that gives them an advantage over Baylor tonight, just because they have a team that's not going to play defensively the way the UCLA Bruins did. But I want to get your thoughts. Is Gonzaga versus Baylor for the national championship a rare instance when the unquestioned best two teams in the country make it to college basketball's final stage, Big C? And then you think about the historical implications of number one versus number two. Are you ready to rate this matchup and how it ranks, at least before the tip-off, with other games in history, Big C? Your thoughts?
Well, on paper, I mean, it's a miraculous game when you look at it, number one versus number two. This is always what the desire is from the fan perspective, Charlton, when you get to a national championship game.
Yeah.
That you have the best two teams in the country. You have the best two teams in professional or collegiate sports. This is as advertised. When I look at this game, Baylor is a much more athletic team than what UCLA is. They can get up and down the court. They're more physical. They have better defensive stamina and positioning than what UCLA has. I don't know if Gonzaga has enough firepower or athleticism to get around Baylor in that aspect. Yes, they've gone wire to wire as the number one team in the country, but Baylor has gone wire to wire as the team in the country.
Yeah.
And it's just going to come down to tonight who's going to lay it on the line. Gonzaga cannot outspeed Baylor. They cannot out-athletic Baylor. And that's what they were able to do against UCLA, and that's the reason why UCLA slowed the game down. Baylor is a wide-open, full-throttle team just like Gonzaga.
Yeah, they're wide-open, full-throttle. But I'm going to tell you something. Gonzaga will cut down the nets tonight. If something felt wrong about penciling in Gonzaga Bulldogs and Baylor Bears for the national championship, if your 2021 March Madness bracket was busted, Big C, on Selection Sunday, it's only because the NCAA tournament has, they've traditionally given us so many surprises, but this really was not a surprise, Big C. Your thoughts?
Well, no, I mean, this is what everyone expected. I mean, and it's about the players. When you look at how Baylor went out and stifled Houston, in that semifinal game, they only gave up 20 points in the first half to a high-flying Houston team that averaged in the mid-80s throughout the season.
Yeah.
They held them to 1/4 of the points that they scored in the first half of that game. I mean, it was a lot of speculation that Houston would not even get to 50 in the game, Charlton, at halftime because how good that Baylor defense was. They just choked out that Cougar offense.
Yeah, it's all fair and love and war. They were very good, but I'm telling you, Houston and Gonzaga, different breed of team. This Bulldogs is a lot different team than what they faced in Houston. Gonzaga, to me, is a generation with a good team. One of those teams you see every generation, Big C. They remind me of UNLV, that team with what they call the grandmama, Larry Johnson, Big C, Stacey Augmon, them good old boys under the late Jerry Tarkanian. But they space the ball around, and that's going to give Baylor some problems tonight, Big C. Also, driving to the basket is going to give them some challenges also. But if we look at the struggles following COVID-19, Big C, everybody went on pause. Baylor isn't that far behind. Baylor's 53-6, Big C, over the past two seasons. The great Gonzaga Bulldogs, they are 62-2, and I think there's a chance we would have had these two teams meet, maybe unbeaten, had it not been for the pause that we all went through with the COVID, Big C. Your thoughts?
Well, I mean, Gonzaga's been in this position before. I believe it was 2017 when they lost to North Carolina, Charlton, when they had an opportunity to win a championship. They went against a team that was accustomed to playing big-time talent on a weekly basis and the physicality and the speed of those teams. You talked about Gonzaga. You said if they played out there in the poultry Pac-12 that they may not have gone undefeated with those bad teams out there. And now they're facing a team that's been solid all year long and only has a couple defeats.
Yeah, well, you can't say that because if you look at if the Pac-12 is paltry, you got to look at what they've done to every team in the country. I believe, my math might be off by a game, but the Pac-12, I believe they were 12-4 in the tournaments. And most, USC lost the game to Gonzaga, but then at the same time, Oregon got the Virginia Commonwealth, they were shut down because of pause. But UCLA, they were the number 4 seed coming into this game out of the Pac-12. They beat the SEC champion. So if they're salty, that means they beat the SEC champion by 10 points. They beat Michigan State, beat them in overtime. They also beat Michigan. In that game, they held Michigan to less than 52 points, Big C. So that if they're bad, then the whole Big Ten is bad. And they also, when you look at what they did, just getting to the point where they got to the national championship game, and it took overtime and a miracle buzzer beater for them to lose to the number 1 seed team in the country, and that's the Gonzaga Bulldogs. So if the Pac-12 is bad, then everybody else is a lot worse. I think the Pac-12 is great.
Well, I look at that during the regular season, Charlton. They had a combined 8 losses between the Mountain West Conference and the West Coast Athletic Conference. So they lost 8 games in head-to-head matchups against those conferences.
But what you fail to understand is the Pac-12 started late because of COVID. But when they got a chance to play it on the floor, just like they argue for the football playoffs, you guys sound a lot taller on the radio, Big C, but when they got you on the court, the Pac-12 ran through the SEC and the Big Ten. You can Google it. It's all fair and love and war. Before we come up on the Big C pause, and I want to wish the very best to Gonzaga, which I believe will cut down the nice. I've called that since March Madness began. I even called that when they showed up on Sports Illustrated. They'll be the first Jesuit university to win a national championship since the great Georgetown Hoyas under the late John Thompson. They're also a Jesuit university, and they're also in a Jesuit city, Indianapolis, Indiana. Also, Big C, Indiana, the last time they were an undefeated team, it was from the state of Indiana, where Gonzaga's going to win tonight, Big C. Your thoughts?
Yeah, but they did that championship game, Charlton. I believe they won that out of Utah, so they were in a Mormon state.
Yeah, but at the same time, it was Indiana, and the scene of the crime is Indianapolis, Indiana. It's going to happen tonight. You will see. Big C, college basketball, North Carolina. Big news for the ACC, Big C. And it's amazing that they did it now as opposed to waiting until March Madness is over. My opinion, North Carolina, they promoted longtime assistant Hubert Davis to replace the great Roy Williams, Big C, Hall of Famer Roy Williams, who did his thing at Kansas, also did his thing at North Carolina. So as a Tar Heels new head coach, the new head basketball coach, the school announced that today, Big C, Davis has been an assistant under Coach Williams for the past 9 seasons in Chapel Hill. One of the favorites as soon as the job opened. I think it's smart to do it before the one shining moment, Big C, with Gonzaga and Baylor, because it gives more people the chance to say, you know what? For the recruits, they can say North Carolina is already ready for next year, Big C. Your thoughts?
Well, this is what North Carolina has done for the past several coaching hires, Charlton. Promote from within. Hubert Davis was a legend at North Carolina, Charlton. All-American forward there under Dean Smith. Went on to a decade-long, 12-year career in the NBA. Charlton played with a few different ball clubs. But he came back to his alma mater and took over the assistant coaching reins. One of the top recruiters on the staff there under Roy Williams, Charlton.
Yeah.
So it's going to be an easy transition by keeping it in-house. All the recruiting trails that they've been on as a coaching staff, they won't lose any of that contact, Charlton, and they're not starting from scratch.
Yeah, I think they did the right time. The timing is right, Big C. You think about a Virginia native. Davis played for Smith at North Carolina, as you mentioned, from 1988 to 1992. Before being a first-round NBA draft pick by the New York Knicks, he spent 12 seasons in the NBA with 6 organizations. And a thing that I love about it, just like Juwan Howard at Michigan, Big C, they're doing the right thing. They're going back to guys that helped them be great in the past, and they're no longer giving them that good old boy treatment, saying, well, we don't know if you're ready yet, or we don't know if now's the right time, we don't know if you have the coaching acumen. I'm glad that we're able to see that this year, Big C. Your thoughts?
Well, once again, when we think about coaching hires, this is another black coach, Charlton, being hired by a major university on the Power 5 level.
Yeah, and I hope he's going to do great, because if you're over at North Carolina, you really have the best pickings of college basketball. What we're going to do is take what's called the Big C pause, also known as the Big C timeout. When we come back, we're going to talk more basketball and a few other things like sports, like football and baseball. It's all fair level war. In the words of the great Arnold Schwarzenegger, we'll be back. All right, we are back from the Big C Pause, also known as the Big C Timeout. You can follow Big C Sports 24 hours a day, 7 days a week on the #1 podcast network in the universe, iHeartRadio Podcast. You can follow Big C Sports on Apple Podcasts. You can follow Big C Sports on Google Podcasts. There's so many apps, and I really do appreciate the growth we're having with Big C Sports. I want to say thank you to Xfinity Comcast TV and Comcast Spotlight for presenting Big C Sports to the universe. Just like God said, let there be light. Open your cell phones and say, play Big C Sports Podcast. You will see all of our apps pop up from all over the world. And I really do appreciate the growth we're having with Big C Sports. So we're looking at one shining moment, Big C. We're looking at cutting down the nets for the national championship game, Gonzaga and Baylor. I believe it's going to be Gonzaga. At the same time, North Carolina makes a new hire. So congratulations to North Carolina. But also college basketball, a little bit different story, Big C. Cincinnati, the Bearcats, they placed basketball coach John Brennan on paid administrative leave, Big C, pending a university review into the program. It announced that Saturday, Big C, and the school announced on March 26th that it was reviewing allegations related to the program along with independent fact finders. And I don't know all what that means, Big C, but that's not a good sign, Big C. Your thoughts?
Well, he took over from John Coons. Coons was the coach for UCLA that got them to the Final Four, Charlton. And so you get a coach that was put into place for this year, and he created a toxic culture amongst the players that the players didn't appreciate. You think about the mass exodus from the university, Charlton. I believe they've had 6 players already enter the transfer portal.
Yeah.
So whatever this coach has done to create a toxic culture, it's not about keeping the players intact on that university's basketball team. And then when they look at Kuhn's success and those players weren't leaving while he was there, it has to be the coach, Joe.
Yeah, it has to be something a little bit fishy, it's my fear and my opinion. But the school did announce March 26th, these allegations appear to be related to an article from The Athletic in which there was a rift between Brandon and some of his players, which had led to a mass exodus in the offseason, Big C. And I know people can move around and for whatever reason, but as you mentioned, during a 1-week span in March, 6 players left or they entered the transfer portal. I'm telling you, there's something that's going to happen in college basketball. It's just my opinion, because players, and I think you will appreciate it, Big C, they're not told you can't have the freedom that a lot of the coaches do. You know, when coaches come into the living room and they recruit, Big C, oftentimes they leave those players high and dry. And just like the UCLA job, I think UCLA is going to be a national power again as long as the college kids can hear the great Bill Walton sound like he's at Woodstock in games, Big C.
Well, there's a long road to climb, Charlton, to be a national power in college basketball. It's all about the scheduling and timing. If people don't see you on national television, it makes it more difficult to be in the national rankings.
Yeah, well, they're going to see UCLA more. They see them all the time on the Pac-12 network, but they got to clear that thing up. And speaking of college, I wish everybody had nothing but the best. I want to touch a little bit into the NBA, Big C, because we talked about some of the great players at UCLA. Lonzo Ball, one of them, splashed a career high, 8 triples, Big C. Think about this. This good old boy for the Pelicans, the guard making a strong return from 7-game layoff, 27 points, 9 assists, and a win over the Rockets. Lonzo Ball, Big C, he was doing his thing, 27 points, 9 assists. He had 8 3-point baskets, Big C. That's a career high. He's the first player in New Orleans franchise history with 8+ assists and 8+ threes in a game, Big C. Your thoughts?
Well, he's become a much more complete player since he's left Los Angeles. I think it was too much focus on him being in his hometown playing professional basketball, Charlton. Once he got down to New Orleans, he's become more of a complete player. And many people don't realize he's leading the NBA this year in three-point percentage.
Yeah, it's amazing how I guess his dad was always trying to market for him, and he and his younger brother are making noise in the NBA. So Mr. Ball knew what he was doing. A lot of people didn't like the way he did it, but he put his kids first, and now they're doing great things in life, and I wish them nothing but the best. NBA basketball, the Bucks, Milwaukee Bucks versus the Portland Trail Blazers. Some of the takeaways, Big C, the great Giannis Antetokounmpo ties the great Wilt Chamberlain in a dominant win, Big C. In a game that wasn't particularly close, the Bucks left Portland, and they left without being on the barbecue grill. You know how they like the barbecue everything in Portland, Big C. But they left with a 127-109 victory. And the victory moved the Bucks to 31-17 on the season. But I think the thing that you'll like the most, Big C, Giannis and Wilt, when you think about it, won All-Star Game MVP award by shooting 16-16 from the field. And Giannis missed all threes on his three-point attempts, but he made 18 of his two-pointers, Big C. Your thoughts?
Well, you know, when they got to Portland, Charlton, they said all those bucks that Dane had in that commercial in the briefcase, and that's what they left town with was those bucks, Charlton. But when you think about the proficiency of Giannis from two-point range, Charlton, going 18 for 18 from the floor, I mean, it's phenomenal. And, you know, one of the benchmarks that we always come up with on our show, Charlton, is that Wilt Chamberlain's name.
Yeah.
And he's never put into the greatest conversation of basketball players all the time. But it's ironic that whenever players are breaking and tying or are getting close to records, Wilt's name always comes up in the conversation. And for all of those people that did not watch Wilt play in the black and white era of NBA on television, he came in the early part of the color television, and people saw him in the latter part of his career.
Yeah.
But you have to continuously recognize the greatness of this man, because 50 years later, people are, you know, trying to tie and chase his record still.
Yeah, and there are a couple of records they can touch, but there's some they won't touch, Big C. But think about this 18 for 18 performance. I mean, think about that. That tied Giannis with the great Wilt Chamberlain for the most two-point attempts without us in NBA games. We talk about so many great players. The great Michael Jordan, the great LeBron James, those good old boys, Dr. J, Magic Johnson, they never had 18 for 18 from two, Big C. Your thoughts?
Well, no, I mean, it just shows you the greatness of those early era black NBA players, Charlton, because all of the players that people want to recognize as superstars now and the greatest players to ever lace it up in the NBA, no, they're only living in the shadow of those great players that came before them.
Yeah, there's so many great players, and Wilt is amazing. We talk about the 100-point game, but think about this, Big C. When you analyze that it wasn't Wilt's record that Giannis matched in this game, he also became the first player since the great Wilt Chamberlain, Big C, going way back to 1967, Big C, to score 45 points and pull in 10 rebounds on at least 85% shooting. Big C, your thoughts?
I mean, it's always Wilt. And I want to see the other programs, Charlton, talk about the greatness of Wilt. You know, I've had enough Jordan overdose over the years. Everybody saying Jordan's the greatest, Jordan's the greatest. When you look at Jordan's great career, I mean, a phenomenal career.
Yeah.
But you have to look at Wilt's accomplishments. That every time you want to talk about somebody getting to a plateau of excellence in the NBA, Wilt keeps coming up behind the shadows, Charlton.
Yeah, I mean, what do you think? Obviously, Big C, people are creatures of now. People want fast food, everything. They don't want to take time. Like the Portland Trailblazers, they were trying to season the meat before they put the buck on the grill. The buck got up and kicked them and left town. Big C, your thoughts?
Well, I don't know if it was game time, but I know it was game time for the Bucks, Charlton, because they stomped the Blazers and stuff. They stomped the fire out and left town.
Yeah, what would you do when the meat got up off the grill and left town? Is all fair level war. Tonight's NBA schedule, not a big one, Big C, for Monday, April 5th. Washington's at Toronto. The New York Knicks are at Brooklyn. Brooklyn's got to put a little, what they call Epsom salt on their wound, Big C. Your thoughts?
Well, I mean, this shows that James Harden is true leader of the NBA. I know people want to rave about Kyrie Irving, but when James Harden's out of the lineup, Kyrie Irving cannot carry that team, but vice versa, James Harden can. And with James Harden out, Kyrie Irving in, they lose once again.
Isn't that amazing, Big C? All the talk about Durant, the MVP. No, it's Kyrie's the MVP. When James Harden doesn't show up for whatever reason, and then the Nets have a tough time. I think he submitted his MVP trophy to me last month, Big C, early in last month. That's just my opinion. Utah, maybe the game tonight, Big C. Utah, with that league's #1 record, they're in Dallas. You know, sometime in Dallas, you get what's called home cooking, and the Mavericks like to eat jazz, Big C. That makes sense to you, your thoughts?
Well, Utah's been that solid team all year long. I mean, they match up with Dallas very well. I mean, they can man up on Luka Doncic as he doesn't strike any fear. the biggest problem for Dallas is the matchup is to get outside on all those wingmen for Utah. And, you got Gobert blocking the paint.
Yeah, it's going to be a great game. I really look at what's happening in the Western Conference where you have the Utah Jazz. No one was expecting them to be at the top of the mountain, but they're at the top of the mountain right now. We'll see if they can stay on top of that mountain. Sacramento Kings at Minnesota, Detroit at Oklahoma City, Cleveland at San Antonio, and then the Phoenix Suns, the number 2 seed in the Western Conference Big C. They're at the Houston Rockets. Do they take them for granted, or do they just blow by on Big C? Your thoughts?
Well, Houston's just happy to get to the arena, Charlton. This is another win for Phoenix.
Yeah, it's another. Well, they got to play the game, but we'll see what happens when they play the game. It's all fair and level war. Wish them nothing but the best. I want to touch a little bit on the world of NFL. NFL is always, no matter what it is, Big C, whether it's March Madness for the men and women, whether it's March Madness for any other thing that's going on around the sports. Golf is getting ready for the Masters coming up this week down in Georgia. I guess the Masters is okay with voter obstruction. They said, we're going to play anyway. We don't care. It's all fair and level war. But NFL, since 2010, in the NFL Big C, there have been 34 quarterbacks drafted in the first round Big C. Only 8 of them have had success in the league. The great Cam Newton, the great Andrew Luck, Patrick Mahomes, Lamar Jackson, Deshaun Watson, Josh Allen, Kyler Murray, and then the great Justin Herbert. Big C, your thoughts?
Well, that shows that all these brain thrusts in the NFL are not as astute as they want you to believe.
Yeah.
When you think about those quarterbacks, Charlton, drafted in the first round, and only 25% of them are having success, that means it's a crapshoot every time you draft a quarterback in the first round.
Yeah.
But that's a lot lower percentage than what people are talking about. And we potentially going to have 4 or 5 quarterbacks, Charlton, taken in the first 7 picks of this upcoming draft.
Yeah, it's amazing that we have, so many players that just want to consider themselves franchise quarterback, and that's how the media builds it up. And you think about, as we talked about, only 11 of those quarterbacks. Could you consider calling a franchise quarterback? Since 2010, 131 quarterbacks been drafted, Big C. I think we can legitimately say maybe I would say 11, maybe 12 that could be considered franchise quarterbacks. The great Russell Wilson. You have Derek Carr, the great Dak Prescott, Cam Newton. You have Andrew Luck, Patrick Mahomes, Deshaun Watson, Big C. And then you have Josh Allen, Lamar Jackson, Kyler Murray, and Justin Herbert. Obviously, we know that Mahomes is a franchise quarterback. The great Russell Wilson, franchise quarterback, because they have championship rings to prove it. Big C, your thoughts?
Well, I mean, you put Andrew Luck into the equation, and you got to take him out of the equation. So basically 10 of the 131 quarterbacks that have been drafted in the first round since 2010 are actually NFL franchise quarterbacks, because they're the only ones that are still in the league when you bring that number down, Charlton. But as you look around, and every year is the next craze for the next franchise quarterback. I know Baker Mayfield might be on the cusp of that, because he did make it to the AFC semifinal round against the Kansas City Chiefs. So, I mean, he needs one more year to prove himself that he deserves to be in that echelon.
Yeah.
But it shows the difficulty in finding the quarterback that can fit your system and lead your franchise. There's so many guys out there that we rave about every year coming out of college, and then when they get to the next level, it's like, well, we had expectations. Think about Patrick Mahomes. He could not even win in college in the Big 12.
Yeah.
Okay? But Paxton Lynch won in the AAC in college at Memphis, and Jerry Jones was mad because he didn't get him in the draft. Then he went to Denver, and he had to settle on Dak Prescott.
Yeah.
Who the hell is still in the NFL? Dak Prescott. I mean, no one knows where Paxton Lynch is these days.
Yeah.
But, it's finding that diamond in the rough when you're drafting a quarterback in any round.
Yeah, Russell Wilson, 2 Super Bowls, 1-1. Dak Prescott, no Super Bowls yet. Cam Newton, 1 Super Bowl, 0-1. Patrick Mahomes, 2 Super Bowls, and 1-1. And a lot of other players that are knocking on that door trying to get there. It's all fair and level war. But also, when I think about the NFL, basically, I want to rank the 7 biggest draft mistakes, perhaps, of the past 3 years, just based on performance. Anyone that gets drafted, God bless them, they've done something. But number 7, New Orleans Saints, they traded up to draft edge Marcus Davenport at number 14 in 2018. Marcus physically blessed as an athlete that has shown flashes of how good he could be when he's healthy, Big C. The Saints face a decision regarding edge rusher Marcus Davenport, By May 3rd, the team needs to decide whether to pick up the fifth-year option for 2020. He's only a 24-year-old kid, Big C, or a young man. And when you think about that, they may have an option that would pay him $9.5 million guaranteed, Big C. Your thoughts?
Well, this is what the Combine has done for so many great athletes coming out of college, Charlton. When you can become a workout animal and perform well at the Combine, it raises your draft stock.
Yeah.
Here's Davenport out of University of Texas, San Antonio, who never played against big-time competition, but he performed well at the Combine. And once he got to get against live NFL competition, Charlton, he's been beaten up physically. So I don't think that the Saints will, pick up that fifth-year option just like the Bears did do on Trubisky.
Yeah, well, we'll see. They still have a few weeks to get it done, Big C. Number 6, the New York Giants, they trade up the draft quarterback DeAndre Baker at number 30 in 2019, what they call Big Blue, the Giants of the East Coast, Big C. The team shipped 4th and 5th round picks to Seattle for the right to move up 7 spots and select Georgia cornerback DeAndre Baker at number 30. In retrospect, the Giants would have been, maybe, in my opinion, much better off standing pat and drafting someone else. As a rookie, Big C, he was roasted in the Big Apple. He allowed 15.7 yards per completion and a half dozen touchdowns to go, Big C. Your thoughts?
Well, being roasted in the Big Apple, Charlton, that can make for a very smelly situation. He reminds me of Elvis Patterson, who used to play with the Denver Broncos, who had the nickname Toast.
Yeah, toast. You ever toast apples? Apples toast that tastes good as long as you don't toast them too long. It's all fair at level 1. Number 5 on the list, Tennessee. The Titans draft offensive tackle Isaiah Wilson, number 29, in 2020, Big C. He wasn't the most technically proficient blocker in that class, but Tennessee thought that at 600, that's what's got 6'7", 340 pounds somewhere in there, and he's a mauler, Big C. To use the number 29 pick on him, less than a year later, he's out of the league. Reminds me of little Tony Manders out of Michigan State back in the day, Big C. Your thoughts?
Well, no, at least Tony Manders has some athletic ability and would try. Here's Isaiah Wilson, played a total of 4 plays in his rookie year with the Tennessee Titans, Charlton. At the end of the season, they facilitated a trade with the Miami Dolphins for a 7th-round draft pick. Think about that. You're a number 1 draft pick the year before, and you're traded for a 7th-round draft pick, Charlton?
Yeah.
And a week later, the Miami Dolphins released.
Yeah, sometimes things go on when you're trying to put on 50 pounds of muscle in 2 weeks, Big C. Sometimes things don't hold together as well as they should. Number 4 on that list, Las Vegas Raiders. They draft Clelin Ferrell, Big C. Number 4 in 2019. The great John Gruden. But his rookie season wasn't terrible. 38 tackles, 4.5 sacks on 648 snaps. But that isn't the impact teams expect from a top 5 pick. Instead, his numbers dropped across the board in 2020, including he only had 2 sacks under that great John Gruden offensive mind and defensive mind, Big C. Your thoughts?
Well, he's purely considered a bust when it comes to standards for an NFL defensive end, Charlton. You're drafted in the 1st round because you're supposed to be able to put pressure on the opposing quarterback. He couldn't even put pressure on the opposing offensive tackle, Charlton.
Yeah. I guess John Gruden come in and clean house, and they got Mayock in there, got rid of McKenzie, and they're still trying to figure it out before that $100 million runs out, Big C. Number 3 on the list, the Washington football team drafts quarterback Dwayne Haskins Jr. out of Ohio State at number 15 in 2019. Now, Haskins wasn't the first quarterback drafted in the 2019 draft. That was the great Kyler Murray, Big C, who went number 1 overall to the Arizona Cardinals, and then head coach Jay Gruden at the time hadn't wanted him to draft Haskins at all. But in November 2019, over the Detroit Lions, Big C, had a win over the Detroit, and Haskins, his first, I think he missed his final, from what I understand, he missed the final snap by taking a selfie with a fan as opposed to being there on the field. And the final straw came last December when Haskins was filmed violating COVID-19 protocols. I guess he decided to party at a club as opposed to pay attention to the football rulebook. Big C, your thoughts?
Well, you think about it. He started partying in the stands, Charlton, during a game.
Yeah.
This guy had lack of attention span as a professional athlete. He showed early on after being drafted by the Washington football team that he was not dedicated and committed to being a professional quarterback. I look at the statement that Tom Brady made a few years ago, that no one's willing to give up their lives to be the best. I'm willing to do that. And the 7 championship rings speak for it.
Yeah.
Dwayne Haskins was lucky to get signed by the Pittsburgh Steelers this offseason, Charlton.
Yeah.
But that won't last long if he can't grow up.
Yeah, and I think he's going to grow up. Sometimes, and anyone can make mistakes, but when you keep repeating the same mistakes, then obviously maybe he doesn't care as much as people think he does. Number 2 on the list, Arizona Cardinals draft Josh Rosen out of the great UCLA Big C. Went to St. John Bosco High School in Bellflower, California, Big C. That's a team that recruits at the high school level as well as on the college programs. And then,
they're paying the kids in California high schools to play.
There's a lot of paperbacks floating around in Orange County, is all I can tell you. I can't confirm or deny where they came from, Big C, but it's all fair level war. The great Josh Rosen. And then he was drafted out of UCLA at number 10 in 2018. But more than a few people, they're wondering how this isn't the biggest draft day mistake of the past 3 years. His family's already well off, so maybe he didn't have the focus. But it's a quintessential player at that position, and we should be celebrating his arrival in the NFL's next great quarterbacks conversation, I would think. 3 years later, just about everything that could go wrong for Rosen has gone wrong. Traded to the Miami Dolphins for a 2nd and a 5th round pick, Big C, in 2019. In 2020, Rosen's time ran out as well. The 24-year-old spent most of his 3rd season on the Tampa Bay Buccaneers practice squad before signing with the San Francisco 49ers in December. Big C, your thoughts?
Well, I mean, you talk about an exodus real quick, and I remember Josh Rosen making a statement on draft day that the teams that bypassed him in the 1st round were going to live to regret it.
Yeah.
I wonder who's regretting it now.
Yeah, those teams that bypassed him, they regret it, Big C. They could have got more trade for him. You got to read between the lines, Big C. It's all fair level war. But number 1 on that list, another kid out of Southern California. And I know a lot of people were saying that Darnold was going to be the great hope, if that makes sense to you, in the NFL. I always thought he left USC early. He was throwing way too many interceptions at USC when they often lined up with the better wide receivers than the competition they were playing against. But be that as it may, he got drafted in the NFL, and I mean, congratulations to him. But the great Sam Darnold, Big C, went to New York. He messed with those man-eaters that Hall & Oates talked about. You know, the man-eaters, they look really good, but it may not be good for you. He got mononucleosis. But, but for the grace of God, who wouldn't get mononucleosis as an NFL player, Big C? But the New York Jets, they trade up for quarterback Sam Darnold at number 3 in 2018. And this is one that stirs debate. After all, while Sam Darnold hasn't been good over 3 seasons, for whatever reason, coaches going in and gumming, everybody has their opinion. But with the New York Jets, he's been better than Josh Rosen. Rosen played at UCLA. Darnold played at USC. At least Rosen, the apologist, can note that he was barely given a chance. Big C, your thoughts?
Well, I mean, Rosen was given very little chance, Dalton. He was given a bad team just like Darnold.
Yeah.
But when you look at Darnold on the biggest stage in New York, and he would rather throw to teams of opposite uniform color than he would to the teams of his color. I mean, you could say mononucleosis. He didn't have it the day he walked into the NFL, Dalton, and he didn't have it last season. So, I mean, there's something wrong with the guy mechanically.
Yeah, something about the mechanics. Maybe he was a sidewire and might be a better baseball player. It's all fair and love and war. But again, your friends, I think it's Kuiper and McShay, they were telling all these sports teams, you better put your money in him. So maybe the guys who drafted him should call those 2 guys and say, where do you get your facts? It's all fair and love and war. But then there's what the trade costs. And when you go back to McShay and Kuiper, they convinced the New York Jets to put their money where those guys' mouth was, Big C. But look at what it cost them. At number 6, New York's original slot, Big C, Indianapolis Colts pick guard Quentin Nelson, who's arguably the best offensive lineman in football. The deal also cost New York 3 second-round picks. Brady Smith is the starting right tackle. For the best line, I think, in the NFL, cornerback Rock Ya-Sin has played a prominent role in the secondary each of the past 2 years. And the 3rd pick, which was traded to Philadelphia, was used in one of the league's better young tight ends, Dallas Goedert, Big C. And you think about how great it is for the Carolina Panthers, Big C. Your thoughts?
Well, yeah, I mean, you have to look at the front office of the New York Jets. You gave up 4 NFL starters for a guy that you've given up on as a starter. And now he's gone to the Carolina Panthers, which I think he will have a rejuvenation of his career because he's going to move in where they have some talented wide receiver and at the running back position and a much better complete offensive line in Carolina. So if he can't perform in Carolina, they have the 5th-year option on his contract coming up next year, which would probably cost the organization about $22 million if they choose to exercise that fifth-year option. But the biggest story here is Teddy Bridgewater.
Yeah.
Now that you make this acquisition for Sam Darnold to bring him to Carolina, what's Teddy Bridgewater's future? You know he's going to be on the trading block because you're not going to make a trade of that nature, Charlton, and bring in this young quarterback and still have this veteran with 2 years left on his contract, hoping that he can learn by sitting on the bench, Charlton. So Teddy Bridgewater will be on the move by draft night in the NFL.
I think Bridgewater's a better quarterback than Darnold, Big C. I mean, 3 years after hailing him as a franchise savior, the New York Jets traded Sam Darnold to Carolina, and I think Bridgewater's a better quarterback. If you look at what he did down in New Orleans, he was winning games. I think at one time he was 5-0, while Darnold was having a hard time finding a receiver. And then this year, I think he had a little, they were banged up. A lot of the guys got banged up for Carolina. But in return for Darnold, the number 3 overall pick in 2018, the Jets received 3 picks, a 6th-rounder in 2021 draft later this month, and a 2nd-rounder and a 4th-rounder in 2022. Big C, you've seen Darnold and you've seen Bridgewater. Bridgewater got the Minnesota Vikings to a playoff game, and they missed it in the cold, missed a field goal in the cold against Seattle, and they lost. That same Bridgewater went down to New Orleans and learned behind the great Drew Brees. And if my math is right, he was undefeated when he started for New Orleans. That got him a big contract. And then traded him over to Carolina, where they had a lot of injuries. Even he was still banged up, Big C. And can you please tell me, in the time that he was with Minnesota and also with New Orleans and then Carolina, if he had more success on the field than the great Sam Darnold? Big C, your thoughts?
Oh, he easily had more success than that quarterback from USC, Charlton. It showed that conference where Louisville plays, the quarterbacks that they put out of there, Bridgewater and Jackson, that they can play. They're NFL-ready quarterbacks. But I see Bridgewater's future heading down to South Florida, Charlton. I see this quarterback ending up with the Miami Dolphins.
Oh, my goodness.
Tua, I don't believe, is the answer in Miami. And now that Bridgewater is available, they're gonna trade him down there. He's gonna restructure his contract, Charlton, and you'll see Miami once again being very competitive and most likely making the playoffs in the AFC East.
Yeah, I mean, Brian Flores, pick him up. Don't let somebody else call him. The guy's won everywhere he's gone, as long as he's given a chance. It's all fair and level war. But just updating the list, Big C, recent first-round picks in 2012. You look at Couples was cut. In 2013, Milner was cut. 2013, Richardson was traded. 2014, Pryor was traded. 2015, Williams traded. 2016, you have Lee traded, Big C's. 2017, Adams traded, doing a good job over Seattle. 2018, now you have Darnold traded again. Maybe things will, with Saleh being in town, maybe things will iron out a little bit better for the Jets. Big C, your thoughts?
Well, what this does is solidify that the Jets are taking a quarterback in the first round. The talk is coming down between the kid Justin Fields at Ohio State and the kid Zach Wilson at BYU. They're going to take one of those two kids, Charlton, to revitalize that offense in New York. They have a young offensive line that they're building in New York, so I think their first 2 picks need to be a quarterback and offensive line. But, Saleh has been a defensive guy over his years in San Francisco. But the Jets need to move forward. And this is one of the moves you commonly get when you get a new coach. If you have a young, unproven quarterback, then he wants to have his guy in place. We saw that in Washington with Rivera. Haskins wasn't his guy, and Haskins wasn't committed. It was easy to move on him. You look at Kingsbury when he went to Arizona a couple of years ago. Rosen was not his guy. And so he sent him shopping and drafted his guy in Kyler Murray, Charlton.
Yep.
So these are the things you have to look at. Drew Lock's also the same situation in Denver, and I'm trying to think of the defensive coach that drafted him. But, you want your guy, so if you're going to get fired, you get fired with your guy, not somebody else's guy.
Yeah, it's all fair and level work, and we wish everybody nothing but the best. I know we have March Madness coming up tonight, basically. I just want to run over the top 5 teams in Major League Baseball. Really want to give them more games to get through, but just focusing on Big C's top 5 so far from Major League Baseball, and some teams have been on pause. I think it's without question the defending world champion Los Angeles Dodgers might be on the top of the Big C Sports universe as the number 1 team in baseball right now, Big C. The Astros coming in at number 2. Them good boys been playing. The San Diego Padres, number 3 on the list. The Toronto Blue Jays, number 4. And I'm going to end with the Mets at number 5 because some of their games have been on pause also. Are you excited so far about what you've seen in Major League Baseball, Big C? Your thoughts?
Well, you talk about the number of games that have been put on pause, Charlton. It's hard to rank teams when you don't have teams that are playing.
Yeah.
But I still like the Rays down in Tampa. I mean, I think about the miraculous run that they made last year, and they can get into the games, Charlton, without having that massive payroll. They always find the young players that are competitive and that are hungry and play great baseball.
Yeah.
So I would not count them out when it comes down to the latter part of the season. Look for the Rays to be back there once again.
It's all fair in love and war. Big C, you know, they're allowing a packed house in Texas tonight for the Texas Rangers. So it should be 40,000 on hand. But think about this. If you're a politician, aren't you looking forward to speaking to 40,000 people at one spot, or letting them see your face in one spot so they don't have to search for you on TV? You want 40,000 fans to hear your message, because if you feel that you're doing the right thing, then you do it in the daylight. When people know they're crooked, they try to do things in the dark. They don't try to do it in bright daylight. They try to do it in the dark, Big C, but the dirt comes out in the wash. Texas Governor Greg Abbott, he backs out of the Texas Rangers' first pitch of the Major League Baseball season in an attempt that could have united the state of Texas. But he decides to pull out because the All-Star game is pulled out of Georgia. And Governor Greg Abbott in Texas, he's also trying to do voter obstruction down in Texas. But if your message is so clear, why would you run away from 40,000 screaming fans and letting them know that they can trust you, that they can follow you, that you're not trying to obstruct the vote, Big C? Your thoughts?
Well, Charlton, what has happened to the Republican Party is that major corporate entities in America have spoken out about this voter obstruction move by the Republican Party, that they're being unfair to all citizens, that they should be providing more ways for citizens to vote instead of taking away opportunities for citizens to vote. But when you've been a liar and you made your law based on the big lie from Donald Trump and you're running with that, you don't want to be out amongst people that you're not aware of, that have been vetted, that are going to cheer in your behalf. And so when you show up at a sporting event, and most of those people are pretty knowledgeable, they listen to some type of news and sports throughout the day, they're going to know that you're screwing them over. Not just black, but white people also, Charlton, that have same of the disadvantages that minorities do.
Yeah.
And so when they see that, they want to let you know about it, and he doesn't want that to be in the public spotlight.
He doesn't. He got struck out at first. He struck out at first at bat. He got struck out at first at bat. Imagine you're the starting pitcher, and you decide that you don't want to show up because you're afraid that people are going to see the dirt that you become. It's all fair and love and war. Tonight's one shining moment, college basketball national championship game on the men's side. Congratulations, Stanford, with a win over Arizona. And they won the national championship for the women's side the first time since 1992. One shining moment, number 1 Gonzaga versus number 2 Baylor. It's for all the marbles in Indianapolis, Indiana. Should be a great basketball game. And I'm going with Gonzaga from the start to the finish to crown that one shining moment. Big C, back in the day, there's a man by the name of Drew Boudini Brown. He was known as Muhammad Ali's right-hand man. And he would always tell Ali, float like a butterfly, sting like a bee, rumble, young man, rumble. With all you've got to use, how can you lose, Big C? What are you looking forward to in the sports universe?
Well, Charlton, in the collegiate sports universe, we always are happy to crown a national champion. Only on the collegiate level can you get 2 national champions in one weekend. When you're talking about hockey and you're talking about baseball, you're talking about basketball. We had the women's national champion that was crowned over the weekend, Charlton, the University of Stanford. Now we have an opportunity for a men's champion tonight, Charlton, with the University of Gonzaga and the Baylor Bears. This is a battle of the animals, the mammals, Charlton, tonight. And we will see tomorrow who comes out the best. Once again, I want to thank our frontline healthcare workers, our nurses, doctors, and first responders. I know they don't treat animals on a regular basis, but they take care of everybody else.
They take care of everybody else. I have a clue for tonight's national champion. Woof, 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 woof. You can roof too every Monday through Friday at 5 and 6 p.m. worldwide when you follow Big C Sports on the Big C Sports Network, on the #1 network in the United States of America, as Big C Sports has been voted the #1 sports show in the universe, according to Big C and them good old boys down south. As my mama always said, there's never ever an excuse for racism or domestic violence. If you know any man, woman, or child going through that garbage, please pick up the phone and ask for help, because no man, woman, or child should ever have to go through that garbage on their own. And as we always tell you on every Big C Sports Show, we thank you, we appreciate you, and we hope that you have a super fantastic day.